I was once featured in a newspaper article where the title was "Religion Doesn't Matter for Immigrant Integration," because this is what many of my findings show, that when we look at how religious immigrants are, that it's not related to how much they participate in society, the labor market, or in education, or the social relations that they have. And right now I'm trying to find out whether different ways of thinking about religion are a better explanation. Dealing with difference and cultural diversity has always fascinated me. And I think it's just also perhaps a coincidence of the time in which I grew up as a researcher, so to speak, that religion was very much at the forefront. We also see that very recently in how we relate to streams of refugees, where some countries really refused to take in refugees from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, that kind of countries, based on the argument we have a Christian heritage, Muslims do not belong here. And there was a very different reaction when Ukrainians started to come here, which we see as ours. So there's a very strong framing and almost synonymous. When people think of migrants, they tend to think of Muslims, and then the next step they think, oh, this is violence, terrorism, extremism. Right now, what we do in the research field in migration studies is that most of our measures only allow us to count what people do. For instance, how often they attend religious services, visit the mosque or religious temples. We ask them how important they think religion is. But we have less information about the different way of approaching religion, reasoning about things, and different meanings that people can derive from it. Among non-migrants, we know that there's a different way of approaching religion more literally. So you think that there is only one correct answer to religious questions, versus more symbolic approaches where people think like, okay, here's a text, but I have to interpret it. What does it mean? They see religion more as a quest. But we haven't studied this among migrants yet at all. And I will try to develop a measure of how people reason about religion in different ways. And I try to make that comparable across 3 religious minority groups to see whether those different ways of reasoning about religion and deriving meaning explain different levels of integration. Again, this is about these different ways of reasoning about religion, and the idea that if you approach religious text from a more symbolic way, that usually goes together with challenging your worldviews a lot, or being open at least to having your worldview challenged when there's new information. So when you meet new people who have different ideas, that you actually engage with those ideas and start to think and reflect on your own ideas and perhaps change them, perhaps become more convinced of them, but at least you engage in a conversation. Because it's not only about religion and do I need to wear a headscarf or not. It's really about the approach to reason and truth. Is there something out there that is fixed and that I only need to uncover, or is it something that I need to search for? And is that the challenge I engage in, and can other people help me with that? The research has the potential to be embedded in really large-scale survey studies. And right now we're not there yet, because the first step is to actually make these different ways of meaning-making measurable in a cross-cultural way. But potentially, if we can make those things measurable cross-culturally, they can be used across multiple countries. And sharing our methodology will also allow other researchers who study other religious communities to enlarge the scope even further. So it's sometimes challenging to explain what research can bring to the table, what it is based on, and it's not always being made easy by media in the way that questions are framed. People asked me to tell about my research. From a 30-minute interview, they used like half a sentence, because everything else I said and what I found just didn't fit in their storyline, so it was not being used. And given the polarization and stigmatization of those groups, I'm also very cautious in how to communicate, what to communicate, and when to communicate this in order to prevent that people are even further stigmatized. I think we need to think about this as social scientists, how we can do this, but I also think that there's other ways of having that debate among ourselves as scientists and with the general public than a newspaper article or a talk show participation. Yeah, I think we need to be aware of those different strategies and talk about which one we use when and why. We have a task as a university and as social scientists to communicate our findings to the public, but it doesn't mean that every social scientist needs to be in the newspaper or in the evening news every evening. I also think we need to avoid the kind of an arms race about, you know, one person saying this and next person, the other person is saying that. I actually see the danger that it will undermine our credibility as social science, because we don't have these natural laws where we always find the same things. I mean, I think there are some findings that are pretty robust, but for each and every study there's usually there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of complexity. And if we fight out those kind of more scientific debates and challenges through the media, I see the risk that we actually undermine our contribution to the public debate, because in some cases one researcher says, oh, it's like this, and the others say, no, we see it like this. I think the conclusions that people draw is that, well, those scientists, they don't know actually what they're talking about, and then I don't think we've done our discipline or our field a big service in doing it like that.